Good afternoon from New York City. I know it's morning for some of you all, but welcome to the session on promoting pet inclusive housing at the governmental level. As I mentioned, my name is Teal Inzunza. I am the Associate Vice President of Justice Initiatives at the Urban Resource Institute which is located in New York City, where we have been committed to pet inclusive shelter as a part of our larger, broader mission around ending homelessness and domestic violence, specifically through our People and Animals Living Safely program, which we started in 2013. I'll be moderating the panel today. The Urban Resource Institute is the largest provider of domestic violence shelter in the country, and we strongly believe that pets are a part of the family. We have instituted our PALS program in 5 of our emergency domestic violence shelters and 5 of our domestic violence transitional housing shelters, along with piloting a new initiative with our Department of Homeless Services in one of our homeless family shelters. We have kind of 2 different systems in New York City, both domestic violence and the homeless family and singles shelters. Through our PALS program, we have served over 800 families and 1,100 pets since we launched our program. I am joined today by Holly Nelson from the San Diego Housing Commission and Kathryn Grosscup from the Colorado Housing Finance Authority, 2 really great examples of people and organizations that are doing really meaningful work in concrete ways around the issue of pet inclusivity. I think what will be really great about our session today is we're not just looking for one intervention. We're kind of taking a variety of approaches, and we're looking at 2 agencies that are working at it from different points and different places on the housing continuum, from emergency and transitional housing and shelter, all the way through supportive housing and permanent affordable housing development, and really asking, what does permanent affordable housing, what does all of this look like if we're building it with pet inclusion in mind, and how do we build infrastructure at all of those levels? So really excited to get started. I'm going to pass it first to Holly, who will talk about the work that she is doing in San Diego.
Thank you, Teal, and good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Holly Nelson, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I've worked in the field of homelessness for over a decade. I've experience with direct practice at local nonprofits, as well as local government, where I ran homelessness and housing contracts. I've been with the San Diego Housing Commission for about 3 years, where I serve as director, where we administer our homeless service contracts. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Perfect. Can everyone see this okay? Wonderful. So today I will be providing an overview of the homeless landscape in San Diego, the role of the San Diego Housing Commission, and the work my team does through the Homelessness Housing Innovations Division. I will discuss why keeping people and pets matters, review how we've integrated pet inclusion language into our contracts, discuss the expectations we have for both program operators and program participants, highlight lessons learned and lessons that we are still continuing to learn as we go through this journey. And at the end of my presentation, I will have a slide with additional resources for other jurisdictions and communities. I would first like to start by providing a brief overview of the City of San Diego and the homelessness landscape in our community. The City of San Diego has a population close to 1.4 million people. There is a shortage of affordable housing for households earning less than 80% of the area median income, which in San Diego is currently $92,700 annually for a one-person household. Like many communities in the United States, incomes have not kept up with the rising cost of housing. The Regional Task Force on the Homelessness, which is our local continuum of care, reports that there are 29,962 active individuals enrolled in our homelessness management information system. Out of that number, 1,064 people experienced homelessness for the first time in the month of January. We know that the inflow into our system continues to outpace exits into housing. When we look at the point in time data from 2025, it states the minimum number of people experiencing homelessness in the city of San Diego was 5,866 folks, which is about 59% of the overall count. The San Diego Housing Commission is a public housing agency serving the city of San Diego. We are the 8th largest city in the country and the 2nd largest in California. Sometimes I keep thinking San Diego is a small town feel, so it's always interesting to kind of hear those stats. We are one of the 39 original agencies to receive a moving to work designation from HUD, and we provide rental assistance to 17,000 households annually. We have designed innovative programs in the space of homelessness, affordable housing, and we advocate for homelessness and housing policies. We administer homeless contracts on behalf of the city of San Diego and provide direct service and contract administration for more than 50 contracts. All of our programs emphasize and prioritize housing-focused outcomes. Again, out of that portfolio, the Homeless Housing Innovations Division, which is the team that I oversee, we administer contracts and programs ranging from homelessness prevention, diversion, emergency shelters, safe parking, transitional housing, day and navigation centers, storage programs, case management, rapid rehousing, and permanent supportive housing. We have over $50 million worth of program dollars utilizing local funds, state and federal dollars. We operate 15 emergency shelters, which provides 1,292 beds. We serve single adults, unaccompanied minors, transitional age youth, families with children, veterans, seniors, and individuals with co-occurring disorder through a blend of congregate, semi-congregate, and non-congregate shelter options. So today, during my part of the presentation, we will be discussing how to implement pet-inclusive housing policies in the emergency shelter, transitional housing, and permanent supportive housing programs. Later in the presentation, Kathryn will speak on the innovative strategies in affordable housing. So why does this all matter, and why is it important to house people and pets together? Well, the human and animal bond is strong, and many owners do not want to separate from their pets. Animals offer safety, protection, companionship, a sense of meaning, and purpose to individuals experiencing homelessness. People who are living on the streets have a high rate of trauma, and being separated from their pet only compounds that loss. While there is no empirical evidence that exists, although maybe another presenter talked about today, emerging practices, we don't really know how many people who are experiencing homelessness have pets. Some COCs have begun to collect this data point, and approximately about 10% of people who are experiencing homelessness have either a service animal, emotional support, or a companion animal. In the city of San Diego, we see about 9% of our referrals coming through our coordinated entry program, which for people who are seeking shelter resources with pets. So it's similar to what the data is presenting. That 9% translates to about 2,000 referrals. Oh, excuse me. In the journal article published in 2019, researchers conducted a study facilitating qualitative interviews with 43 unsheltered adults. Pet inclusion policies were one of the top 4 reasons a person declines help. They found that the prohibition of animals in city-funded shelters, drop-in centers, and transitional housing presented a major barrier to those who would have otherwise accepted placement if they accepted pets. So pet-friendly shelters improves a person's likelihood to engage and accept shelter resources, and being pet inclusive in general is aligned with best practices we see in our industry on how to operate low barrier programs. So how does this work in practice? This all sounds really good, right? So in 2018, and this is after many, many years of trying to implement low barrier practices, the Housing Commission conducted a significant overhaul of its operating agreements for shelters, transitional housing, and permanent supportive housing programs to better align with Housing First and low barrier shelters operational principles. Numerous changes were made to the contract, ranging from the elimination of the maximum length of stay for shelter residents, service participation requirements and case management, sobriety, medication adherence, identification, belongings, um, partners, and pets. We announced these changes during our annual fiscal kickoff meeting, and our contract analysts who are assigned to the contracts provided additional technical assistance to help operators make this change. The contract requires program operators to create policies and procedures for assistance, animals, and pets. These policies and procedures must be submitted to San Diego Housing Commission within 30 days of the contract start date, or for new programs, we see about 90 days after the start date. Currently, our scope of work states that we require policies and procedures for service animals, assistance animals, including therapy and emotional support, and service animals, as well as companion and support animals. The contract language is applicable to emergency shelters, safe parking, transitional housing, permanent supportive housing, with the exception of rapid rehousing and scattered site permanent supportive housing, since we typically see that this is out in the community and it is landlord specific. But the ones that we do try to control or that we operate, we do try to influence through our contracts. While we thought we were being clear with this language, we found that there was some confusion from program operators around what and how we define companion animal as pets, as well as what type of animals could be accommodated in housing. So we went back to the drawing board and made subsequent revisions to the operating agreements to strengthen language pertaining to people and pets. So now coming up in this year, we have now enhanced our language to say that we are accepting pets, and then we define it with cats, dogs, birds, and other animals not prohibited by applicable law, and assistance animals, and we define that as service animals and emotional support. We intentionally led with the contract language with pets first, so it was very clear to program operators that that is a requirement, as well as there's been confusion around what animals shelters could adopt. And so we made sure that that was something that, rather than listing the myriad of different animals that are options, we did try to say name the most common that we see within our shelter system, as well as making sure that we outline that those that are illegal or prohibited by law are not allowed to be in the shelter programs. So as far as implementation goes, we ensure that our program operators are adhering to these requirements through several different activities. One thing that is unique about our referral process or our system is that for people who are outreach workers, and since we operate most of the shelters in the city of San Diego, our outreach workers and people who are interested in getting people into shelter submit into a coordinated shelter intake program that we manage. It's 7 days a week, most days of the year, with the exception of holidays. And we help place people to the available resources. So that's one way that we're able to identify if a referral is rejected or if there's concerns coming up from both the participant or the program. That's one way we're able to dial in and recognize that there's maybe an issue with implementation. The other thing is that our contract monitors provide monthly and quarterly programmatic reviews and technical assistance with our program operators. So we talk about what's going on, things that are working well as challenges. And so if we do see concerns or there's issues with pets within the program, that's an opportunity where we can have that dialogue. Additionally, we have, as part of our monitoring, we collect participant interviews and feedback. And then we have other mechanisms that we require our program operators to collect program feedback. We have a Pulse for Good system, which is a kiosk where individuals can anonymously submit feedback, as well as other channels where it's house meetings or other opportunities where people can elevate concerns. As well as we have a grievance and termination and appeals process. So if a person is exited or they're concerned and they're not able to resolve their issue directly with the program operator, they can appeal or reach out to the commission where we can listen to that. And we have had cases where it has involved animals. So with that, with the as well as with compliance monitoring, so we have a compliance team that helps support us to do this work, and they assess programs every 1 to 3 years based on funding source requirement or risk assessment to ensure policies and procedures are compliant. For new program operators, they usually always get monitored the first year. And then they also provide technical assistance through TA presentations, where we require that as part of our contract, where individuals, we talk about maybe systemic issues that we are seeing within our portfolio for both our housing providers as well as our shelter teams. And so we provide that technical assistance 2 times per year. And again, we review policies and procedures, which I'll go into a little bit more detail on the next slide. So as we talked about, we've named what our expectations are for our program operators to accept pets. We also ask that they develop very clear policies and procedures outlining animals. We want to hear kind of their requirements as well as how they verify what documentation that they require, what rules that they impose, and how they are defining pets, emotional support, and service animals, because each one has different requirements. For example, a service animal, the shelter as a whole may have a leash policy where they require animals to be on a leash. But for a service animal, like a dog or a mini horse who is required to do a task and perform work to help the individual, that leash may not be appropriate. So we want to kind of really dig in to see how are they defining it, what are the requirements, are there variations and differences between those definitions. We want to ensure non-discrimination is occurring and that people who apply for a reasonable accommodation, regardless of where they are in the process of an intake or throughout their stay, are able to have reasonable accommodations. And then also ensuring that when animals and emotional support service animals do not create barriers when leasing into programs. We also ask program operators to identify places for animals to relieve themselves and use the restroom. So that is part of an expectation that we have, as well as making sure that whatever they're saying internally to their staff also is aligned with participant-facing documents so that there is parity and that we're not telling somebody one thing and saying something else. We encourage partnerships with local animal programs, and we do, again, provide that through case conferencing, through our technical assistance, but really helping them establish so that they can bring resources in-house to be able to help care for the pets, since we know that that is very important for our folks who are living on the streets or in our shelter system. And then we also we also advise them to be knowledgeable about what is going on at the local, state, and federal laws. A lot of times there are additional requirements that they need to take into consideration when adopting their pet policies to make sure that they are, educating about rabies vaccinations and other things that are required at the county level. So what do we require for our participants? With that, we ask and we require, and they sign this as they come into the program, and this is universal throughout our entire system. We ask that pets and support animals must be adequately cared for. We ask that the participants are required to manage their pets' interactions with other participants, as well as other pets and animals on site. We also make sure that the participant is aware that they are responsible for providing pet food, fresh water, medical care, and basic grooming services. Although case management, they can bridge them to other resources and supports. And that shelters can impose additional requirements around vaccination, licensure, microchip to verify ownership, making sure that animals are housebroken, supervision, crates, leashes, and kennels, and general animal conduct. So there may be some of those deviations between different programs, but we want to give our program operators the autonomy to be able to make that decision based on what they're seeing and their needs, as long as it doesn't conflict with some of the guidance that we've talked about with the state and federal guidance. And I do want to kind of call out one thing that's very important is that when we notice that there's a violation with any of these items and bullet points listed above, the violation will result in the pet or support animal being exited from the program, not the program participant. So our expectation for our operators is to make sure that they are bridging people to alternative resources if a pet needs to be exited due to a behavior concern or some other issues, And with that, that may be through fostering a trusted family and friend, or kind of leveraging our partners at the Humane Society to see if they can hold it at zero cost. So those are all resources that we encourage them to do so that the participant themselves doesn't put their housing in jeopardy. So again, there's a lot of lessons learned, and there's ongoing challenges and concerns that I'm not going to say that this is always perfect, and that we really it is a fostering a culture shift, and so we want to make sure that that we are being sensitive, and that we are doing a lot of open conversations and dialogues and empathy, as well as making sure that if we can be flexible with the budget, allowing them to have budget implications or allowing them to use line items, health and safety concerns that sometimes come up, be prepared for residents who have allergies, to relocate people, spacing limitations with crates and big animals, basic care, and just ongoing training with the staff, because we know that with our frontline staff, they're doing really hard jobs and there's oftentimes turnover. But and with that, here's some resources that people can utilize, and happy to answer questions towards the end of the presentation. So thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Holly. That was amazing. It's so inspiring to see all the work you're doing in San Diego and how you all have really pioneered that in the city. I'm excited to pass it next to Kathryn, who will be sharing that other end of the housing continuum. So without further ado, pass it over to you, Kathryn.
Thank you very much, Teal. And let me get my slides up here. All right, well, good. Hopefully it's close to afternoon for most of us here. It's tipped over that line in Colorado. My name is Kathryn Grosscup, and I work at the Colorado Housing and Finance Authority as a manager with federal and state housing tax credits. And I'm going to sort of share the journey of a full state perspective around thinking and learning and walking in partnership with developers who apply for financial resources, including tax credits, to CHFA. So a little bit of a distinction in that we're not directly owning and operating development. So let me check this. So just first, a little bit about CHFA, Colorado Housing and Finance Authority. We're actually not a state governmental entity, so we stand outside of any direct appropriations from our state government. We do have a board of directors that is tied into our statutory authority as a quasi-governmental entity. And we do quite a lot of work, including adding in 1982 economic development work, so sort of lines of business for CHFA as an HFA, which can be very different across different states. But for CHFA, quite a lot of support for first-time and moderate home buyers with mortgage assistance and support, developing and working with small women and minority-owned businesses in a variety of programs that expand economic development in the state of Colorado, and then quite a bit of work with multifamily rental housing, and I'll talk about that housing spectrum, but often supporting developments that serve very deep affordability, often supportive housing or transitioning from shelter into a supportive housing development, all the way through even a middle income rental space across the state in a variety of markets. And in CHFA's tenure, now in our 52nd year, we've been able to raise about $40.2 billion for investment in the state of Colorado. So high impact in a variety of different areas. We are very true to our mission, which is to strengthen Colorado by investing in affordable housing and community development. And we really do try to bring that vision to every community across the state, that everyone in Colorado will have the opportunity for housing stability and economic prosperity. So kind of dovetailing on the theme here between the three of us and trying to talk across the housing continuum, you just heard great work in the city and county of San Diego relating to work maybe on the left side of the housing continuum: homeless shelters, transitional housing, in some cases supportive housing. And I'm going to spend some time talking more about the middle of this housing continuum. So focusing primarily on affordable rental housing, but certainly housing tax credits can underpin the financial creation of permanent supportive housing, or I would say supportive housing. And in Colorado, we actually have a middle income state housing credit that works to support rental housing responses in that purple area. So think about some of our rural resort areas that have very high costs and high challenges, as well as even in metro markets with larger bedroom size developments. I'm going to kind of just tell the story of CHAFA's experience in learning and partnership around pet inclusiveness and understanding sort of the portfolio of our existing environment and sort of the different perspectives, both from advocates and stakeholders, as well as owners and operators of developments, and how we've tried to sort of balance all of that dialogue in this conversation. So really the start, I think, was a partnership developed with the American Society of the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, ASPCA, where we really were approached and very willing to enter into a dialogue and understand more about are there pet barriers in developments that CHAFA was involved with? What were the existing environment around pet-friendly policies? And just really learn and understand a broader perspective about both barriers, concerns, and areas of opportunities with a variety of stakeholders. So we created a partnership, and CHAFA does this frequently, where we really first sort of adopt a learning approach before we move into maybe action steps. And so looking backwards into kind of the 2023 year, in partnership with ASPCA, we created a pet policy working group, and we tried to involve a lot of different stakeholders that utilize tax credit and other lending resources from CHAFA. Tried to think holistically around different areas of the state, so making sure both nonprofit and for-profit developers were included, different markets. You can think about our Front Range and our Denver area, as well as a lot of the more rural areas of Colorado. We knew too that supportive housing developers are a key stakeholder in this conversation, as well as a broader perspective of housing developers who might not be providing opportunity for extremely low income households and very affordable rents, but developing more in the space of maybe two earner households, so more of a 60%, even higher area median income of that household. And a key additional stakeholder in the conversation that we recognized would be property managers, so those who actually on the day-to-day oversee and operate affordable housing and middle-income housing developments. And so all of this group came together, and we held several meetings. And I think our first thought is, let's learn around what is the existing perspective of a whole host. We have about 800 different developments in Colorado that are supported in different ways with tax credits and therefore affordable rental developments. And so we developed a survey. We took all of the input from this group and created a survey to really lean in and understand what are gaps and how could we think about different recommendations once we really had a better understanding. And the responses were interesting. So the PET survey of affordable rental developments really showcased that generally Colorado is an area where many households are known to have pets, and that's borne out in many ways with the affordable housing portfolio, where of the responses, a high percentage, 92, did in fact allow pets, and a small percentage of buildings did not allow pets for different reasons. So we knew that that was the place where we were starting from. And we knew that we had gotten a response from a mix of resident types, so older adult, family-focused, supportive housing, maybe for special populations, so a host there, and good geographic representation, so across areas where there may be robust supports, pet shelters, other resources that can support challenges when there are with a pet, or areas of the state where there are just many fewer resources due to smaller populations and geographies. And so our first action was to create a pet policy resource library. And this is live, and I would just like to share this link to anyone here. I think the slides are available, and it's a live database that we have found that really tries to just communicate a way for owners and operators to learn about sample pet addendums or examples of pet policies, pragmatic tools that often an owner or an operator makes it easier for them if they can just download an example rather than having to figure out how to pay counsel to build a pet addendum. The library contains resources around legal requirements, certainly for emotional support animals, as well as Colorado does have some laws limiting the amount of deposit requirements that can be required for any pet, and other considerations, as well as just best practices. How does an owner operator of any apartment complex, as well as an affordable housing apartment complex or affordable housing development, think about the best practices to make sure that they're setting up an environment where there's success for all residents? So that's a resource that we maintain and created as part of this partnership. Then, as we explored further, CHAFA offers an extensive amount of training to really support developers who are interested in affordable housing and the myriad of considerations, as well as resident success, ultimately their leasing success, that would relate to pets. And so we invited ASPCA and some other key experts to participate in sharing these webinars. And I've listed a couple titles here with their bullet points of content. And these webinars are actually available and recorded in many cases and can be accessed on demand, in some cases with low membership costs, to the CHAFA Reach educational landing page. So we knew that helping owners understand models in affordable housing, not only making the case about benefits of distinguishing between pet friendly and moving with consideration to pet inclusive housing, but the pragmatic elements of that, the pet agreement, how do you mitigate risks that can be present at any development, and then even offering training to really help developers or more property management work on a pet policy prototype. So actually supporting the drafting and consideration of how to create pet addendums and policies that can be put into action developments. And there's a host of other webinars that represent sort of the understanding of how you find resources, support compliance, of course, so understanding that legal environment that Holly talked about in some cases, and distinguishing, of course, with emotional support, but then the support for pet inclusiveness, and then perspectives on laws and best practices. And then finally, working with ASPCA in this partnership and continuing last year, CHAFA adopted a incentive in our allocation plan to really distinguish between the high number of developments that were pet friendly, but moving to really articulate and help create an incentive for pet inclusive housing. So that really was codified as allowing one or more dog or cat, and really clarifying that this is beyond service or support animals to really a pet inclusive environment. And I'm pleased to share that at the end of the first year, of course, so only 1 year of data, we did see movement toward pet inclusiveness. And I think this is kind of built on the whole platform of having resources available for developers and property managers so that they have those at their fingertips, creating incentive, and really elevating the conversation holistically so that there's a thoughtfulness in all of these responses around the resources that are available in any particular community to support individuals and families in affordable housing developments. And understanding too the built environment that may be necessary. So including pet amenities like dog runs or pet washes, pet relief areas, of course. So um, really that partnership model I would share has been sort of the best approach that CHAFA has found, where you're working and walking alongside, you're providing both educational opportunities, incentives, and being mindful about the incredible variety of contexts that exists in the housing continuum, and ultimately the risk and building profile and individual level decision making that all of this takes. So happy to be available for questions, but that is sort of the journey that Colorado has gone on in terms of this with pet inclusiveness. So thank you there, and back to
Thank
you, Teal.
you. Thank you, Kathryn. That was amazing. It's really inspiring to see. We have a bunch of questions on the Hoover app. If you have additional questions, make sure to put them in the Q&A section. There's some people voting on which questions, so we'll start with the ones that have the most votes, and we'll kind of go from there. We have a good amount of time to get questions answered, so I'm excited for that. The first question is for Holly. So Holly, if I'm understanding correctly, SDHC's expectation is simply that operators accept pets and assistance animals, and there are basic participant expectations, but each provider develops their own policy. How much variation are you seeing between the policies, and can you describe the biggest differences that you are seeing?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I think, yes, that is correct. We try to give the overall framework. Our compliance team does have a set of kind of core components that we are looking for in each policy. But we know each shelter site and location does vary drastically. So, for example, the expectation may be, again, at the fundamental level, they accept all animals, but there may be a limit to how many big dogs that they accept within a shelter system. We had one provider say, well, we'll remove a bed. We're like, no, 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 no. We don't want to remove one of our beds, but
Mhm.
how can we get creative and allow for that change? So some of our programs, we see that they have policies and procedures that say we can only accept X amount of dogs or big dogs or small dogs. Sometimes there's limitations because of bed availability too. So one thing that I didn't really dive into too much, but we do try to place people on the lower bunk if it's a bunk bed congregate setting so that they can be closer to their animal. So that's something that we try to be sensitive and mindful to. So that sometimes creates some things, but we do see based off the composition of the shelter, the size, the capability, we do see variations throughout our policies and procedures, but we also want them to be able to really, they are the experts of their own shelter and allowing them to make decisions that make best for them within the framework that we have. So we do try to allow that. Some pet policies require, additional documents that say if you're leave your dog unattended or animal unattended. Same with if we have fish or iguanas or other types of birds, like there's other kind of parameters that we put in place, but we really try to the best of our ability, get to the core of what we're looking for, which is including pets in programs, but allowing for the provider to make the decisions that make sense for them.
Thanks, Holly. And then we have another question we have a question for Kathryn, actually. So I'm actually going to there's one that I saw that I thought would be good. Sorry, they're moving around. So I'm trying to keep track of all the questions. But Kathryn, for people who are less familiar with housing finance, can you describe the QAP in greater detail and how it is used in Colorado to incentivize pet inclusive housing?
Sure. Thank you for the question. Um, I don't know if I can do justice to this sort of complexity of housing finance, just in the time we have today. And I also want to just acknowledge that the resource landscape is just really different in different environments of the country. So I can speak sort of to the Colorado context, but each at HFA government level agencies and states, local resources all make up different aspects of housing finance and opportunity. Um, I do think that uh, really sometimes it's very location specific because so often resident success and the context of what incentivizes developers to create responses to affordable housing demand uh, can be just very market specific and also um, relate to not only just resources, but sort of the context of where market rents are and where macro finance lending rates and et cetera really make a difference. So there's not a one size fits all is where I'm trying to go with that statement. Um, an allocation plan is simply a document that talks about how a key resource, but not the only one, which are housing tax credits, is applied for and awarded. And it's an opportunity, but I don't think it's an end all be all to really find all answers. So in Chaffa's case, we wanted to create incentives. So we added a way to acknowledge that perspective of a developer's commitment by a scoring point. So that's one way. There's lots of ways to think about that. But we also, I think, hand in glove, tried to create a resource environment. So there wasn't nearly just, if you will, like a stick, but then you create opportunities to understand and contemplate because ultimately demanding something without really having the final built environment thoughtfully done, where there really is a perspective from a property management agent and owner operator on how do we create a great place to live so that all here, those with or without pets and other considerations, really thrive and have their best opportunity. So that's how the perspective, where we've come from that in Colorado with Chaffa.
Thank you so much, Kathryn. Okay, I'm going to go back to Holly. One of the questions is, what is the biggest pushback from the different types of housing operators? And so they said like emergency, transitional, permanent supportive housing that you've seen.
Yeah, so we see sometimes, again, space and space challenges. That is a big limitation. So, and then also just kind of fear around if we do incorporate animals, we're going to have all of these. We are going to be liable if an animal bites somebody else or if there's an issue. Sometimes there also are medical challenges. So just the extra challenge of like how many animals are in a space. Sometimes, again, how can we logistically be like, we sometimes have to support inter shelter transfer or like inside the shelter because a resident may have, another resident may have allergies or the dog is barking. I just went to a shelter the other night and the dog won't stop barking. So I think, how to create a milieu that's comfortable for everybody in that space. And so those were some of the pushbacks, I think. And again, we're very fortunate because we haven't, even though we have this implemented in our process, we haven't seen any concerns with animal bites. We've seen people lunge or attack or not attack, but like lunge, where we've had to address things, but we haven't had any physical situations happen. The other thing for our permanent supportive housing, I think projects is more on the side of damage and what does that look like with resident turnover. And so, if you have a dog or an animal that's, creating, potential damages within you, whether it's carpet or other stuff, that's been a challenge that has come up. And just we've tried to mitigate that by getting ahead, trying to provide buffers with additional funding resources to offset, as well as allowing them to reach out to other shelter or housing providers that are already doing this work so they can leverage the expertise and kind of ease their own anxiety. It's easy for somebody who is not living it to give direction, but then to kind of really partner and pair and share policies and procedures, similar to what Kathryn had mentioned with resources, being able to kind of really allow people to learn from what other people are doing and see again what makes sense for them.
Yeah, thank you, Holly. I feel like on the domestic violence emergency side and transitional housing side, similarly, we've heard, yeah, what if a dog bites someone, the shared spaces, and then shared units, like roommates not wanting to share a unit with a pet or that causing conflict. And so I appreciate your examples there. Those are very realistic. Um, Kathryn, I have a question for you in the chat. What are the best ways that animal advocates, organizations, and funders support pet inclusive housing development and finance?
Wow, that's a great question.
Big question.
Um, I don't know if I'm an expert on the best ways. I think that all of us just holding a posture of listening to multiple voices in this space, because the end goal is to create stability for households across a wide variety of incomes, contexts, family size, needs, marketplaces in our variety of areas of work, and for it to be viable for the long haul, to really ensure that we're not creating opportunities. I'm thinking of built opportunities on the housing continuum that aren't there for decades, 40 years, 50 years, so the long-term viability, because we all know that affordable housing is a tremendous challenge in all markets, in all states, and for each of us. And so it's a complicated where we all sort of have to work together. So I think that having the perspective that there are so many needs that touch housing, and it's just such an elevated deficit of need in our country, that we have to allow flexibility where we can. We have to be pragmatic. We have to be solutions oriented. I think we have to be in good dialogue with each other. And I think we have to be iterative. So the resources that I have, I want to make available to all here. And I hope vice versa, which I know is happening across the app in other ways. Um, and 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 so I don't know if there's a great way. I think a couple things is just really um, finding those resources for those best practices, because both of you have mentioned, and I could share the same, challenges that are there. So how do those challenges get inked into policies? And how do we just help those who um, are in responsible jobs of property management to create environments where there is resident success, and really just provide technical tools to make their lives easier.
Yeah, I think something you mentioned, Kathryn, and we talked about when we were prepping for this panel was like the power of relationships and how kind of all of these different, uh, people coming from very different perspectives and have very different like needs need to work together in order to move this forward and like really understanding what the different perspectives and building those relationships over time is like very important. It's like a process for sure. Um, thank you. The next question is for both of you. So, what is one policy or funding change that has been most effective in increasing pet inclusive housing, and how can other communities advocate for something similar?
So again, like I don't know all of the policies that our state has done in the space of pets, but one thing that was in recent years that was incredibly helpful for at least a lot of our shelters and resources here in San Diego was AB 1215 or 1215, which was basically pet assistance with support. So this was legislation that was drafted and signed into law that allowed shelter operators of domestic violence and homeless shelters be able to apply for grants to be able to make their programs more pet inclusive. So providing financial dollars to be able to pay for crates, again, pet spaces, dog wash areas, other medical needs that come up with pets that we know happen and people don't have the finances to be able to support. So that was something that unfortunately was only for 1 year, but I know that when I worked in local government, That was a position that our city took and wrote a letter of support for the legislation. And so there's opportunities where, all cities and a lot of housing authorities do have lobbyists attached. So if there are, areas where you're seeing that like there's current things that are being drafted or going through different committees, that's something where you can say, this is something that we really support and we would like to be able to sign on. Can you support this? And that could be something that it could have a larger impact in the system. So we saw many people being able to, again, build that without having to utilize precious program dollars to carve out, and to be able to say, how can we enhance what we are currently doing to improve and improve accessibility?
I think the only thing I could think to add, and I had kind of gone there in my mind first, Holly, but is resources to support that connection between a pet and their owner when there maybe has to be transition. So temporary resourced opportunities, there has to be a separation. Maybe there's support around what are logical, deposit requirements at a affordable housing development, but resources for that. Um, Food, vaccine, all of the pet care areas. But to create success, it can't simply be um, opening the door for tenancy or shelter opportunity to include pets, but the the opportunity to really support the owner of the pet with whatever challenges and requirements that come with responsible ownership. And then also sort of the place that's a little bit beyond all of us here, at least Holly and myself in terms of resource, but there's larger challenges across all affordable housing, insurance requirements that are very significant headwinds, costs to even create and develop, and so tough trade-offs around how much policy is added to the opportunity to just create more units. So those are ongoing, not new perspectives, but they're just part of the overall dialogue to think about.
Yeah, I was thinking even like on a like a different level in New York State, we have some legislation that's pending around training providers on how to start this work and do it themselves, because I think it's hard to often like know where to start, and spaces like this are great, but like being able to have like a dedicated person to be able to come and like provide technical assistance, I think is something that could be really important going forward, because it is hard to know how to start and do all these things, on your own. Lots of us learned it kind of like by just doing, and like probably be easier if someone was like, hey, here's some best practices and like here's what to think about and how to include it in your intake, and talk to your board, so that's something I was just thinking about as well. The next question is for Holly. Um, was there a particular impetus for the inclusion of pets in SCHC policy? Do you?
Yeah, I think again, it was in that spirit of trying to be low barrier and recognizing that we're missing a huge part of our population if we don't allow people and pets to shelter together. So, if we are really serious about ending homelessness and trying to help people resolve their homelessness quickly and making it brief, rare, and non occurring, we need to be able to we need to look at our current system and where people are saying no. Going back to that study, a lot of times I know as an operator, if many of my folks I was working with had animals, and I was always having to find an emotional support letter to justify why they needed to go in, and it was just all these hurdles that we had to go through, and took quite a process before even somebody could get into the door of a shelter and or a program. And so to be able to say, hey, we are going to accept you. You do not require any documentation. We want to make sure that you have a space for your animal, really was a game changer for people, so when you find that person's in that moment of saying yes, that you have the opportunity available for them. But we, again, wanted to make a lot of changes around low barriers. We also had some shelter providers that were doing it successfully. And so we were able to kind of lean in and ask and have, working group discussions to kind of talk about what was going on to be able to help make that change. But yeah, we know that we know as far as being low barrier and we look at best practices, removing pet restrictions is always one of the top things that come up when we're trying to operate a program. So we wanted to make sure that we were aligned with that.
Totally. I know when we started our PALS program, our CEO had gone to a conference and heard about the barriers for survivors to access shelter. And that was sort of the impetus. And we worked to do a study with the National Domestic Violence Hotline and found that 50% of survivors wouldn't, I think it's like 48% wouldn't leave an abusive relationship if they couldn't bring their pet with them. And I think that's been a real motivating factor for us. And I know that's only a portion of the work that we're all doing, but definitely one that we want to center and think through, especially when it comes to safety. Okay, we have more questions than I think we'll have time for, which is great. It's a great problem to have. Um, I guess maybe the next question, I'm trying to actually, I think let's do one of the things we talked about is like practical tips in implementation of some of these like policies and procedures. And I wonder if like each of you have some practical tips and or like if you have one thing that you hope for in the future, like what do you hope to see? So feel free to choose between the two of those questions.
Well, I'll sort of start from the standpoint of trying to encourage and grow and foster affordable housing development in a higher state context. Um, so one thing I hope for, which is probably not revolutionary to anyone here, but it's just more resource. It's such often a resource constrained environment in so many ways that pit choices against other choices, and there's just the requirement to make a choice. So it limits in some ways the most holistic perspective of outcomes. So if I had one wish, it would be to find ways toward more resource and resource that's not just thinking about a capital stack, the sources and uses of a commercial real estate project, but how do we think about that economic prosperity of all of our customers and clients and stakeholders? And that involves lots of soft supports, navigational supports, resources, and those are very complicated to develop. So I think while I say resource, I guess I'm really trying to pull it apart and provide different areas. So thanks for that question too.
Yeah, great, really great question. And I think the practical tips that we've learned along the way is that when we are rolling out big initiatives across our shelter portfolio, the importance of taking time and having working groups, like Kathryn alluded to, really inviting them to help co-create those policies and procedures. Um, and where everyone feels comfortable. So we sometimes have now when we're doing work, we have provider focused listening groups. We have participant listening groups because they may have different perspectives that they bring. People who are currently unsheltered and some of our lived and living experience groups to kind of see how that works not in the system. And so really trying to incorporate that and then really kind of standing on the ground of like where your non-negotiables are. Like, yes, you're going to have pets, but how can we do this in a way that also supports like some of the nuances of your program? And then also establishing those relationships for providers, like saying like, here's a list of animals or here's some services that are available. So you can kind of give that warm handoff and introduce them. But we found that that's helpful and data tracking too. I know like Teal and I both mentioned one of the impetuses to this work was that we're seeing how many people are saying no to shelter or not able to access shelter because of that. So if you do have, working with your COC to be able to get that data and being able to tell that story to people in government in different positions in your agency to say, hey, this is something that we're really missing a huge segment of the population, or we're putting people's lives in danger by, in shelter, we also see as a life-saving intervention too, to get people into resources immediately. Why are we doing this? And just because it's what we've done always doesn't mean it's what we need to do moving forward and having those iterative conversations.
Amazing. Thank you both. We're out of time. This has been a beautiful conversation. It's great to be with you both. I hope everyone has a great rest of their day. Thank you all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Chasing the night away, never judging.